So the goals for today is to sort of understand the process for applying to colleges and universities in the U.S., learn some key components of a student's application, like what you actually send to a college when you apply, and then identify areas that students should start to focus on during grades 9, 10, and 11. So what's important for that application.
And then to help us with the presentation today, we have Tony Tordella from Fitchburg State. He is the Director of Admissions at Fitchburg State, and then I put in his information, as well as the admissions officer that usually covers Shrewsbury High School, Amanda Agassi. So that way, if you have some questions that you want to follow up, especially about Fitchburg, you can reach out to them as well. I'll let Tony take it from here.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to notice it is just like your kids in class. Nobody chose to sit in the front row. So as Danny said, my name is Tony Tordella. I'm the Director of Admissions at Fitchburg State University. For those of you that are not familiar with it, Fitchburg is a small, medium-sized public university located about 35 minutes here, north of Shrewsbury, Worcester, in Fitchburg, Mass. I am not here to give you the shtick about Fitchburg State University. Here to talk about the college process in general, overview. I've been in higher education for over 20 years. Previously, I held leadership positions at St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire, as well as Plymouth State University, also in New Hampshire. I serve on the executive board for the New England Transfer for schools that work with students in the transfer realm. Some students start at one school and for one reason or other choose to transfer another. I've also served on the board for the New England Association of College Admission Counselors as well. That is all to say that despite all what that sounds really fancy, I am not an expert. I don't claim to be one or play one on television. Here to, again, provide you some general oversight. This conversation today, I do not have the magic bullet answer that is going to guarantee that your student gets into the school of their number one choice. If I had that magic bullet, I wouldn't be here. I would be traveling the world giving that information at ridiculously high prices. So, but with that being said, certainly love to have the conversation about those topics that were mentioned and answer your questions to the best of my ability. So with that, let's get going. If we want to, I don't know which, you had some of the questions you wanted to ask, or we want to just open it up? Do we want to start talking about some of the topics that you had on your goal list?
Yeah. So we do have some frequently asked questions. So I was wondering, before we jump into this, can you give like an overview of what the application system looks like?
Certainly. So one of the challenges that students and families face is the fact that here in the United States, there are over 3,600 colleges and universities of all varying types. 2-year school, 4-year school, public, private. And the reality is that schools are unique in what they ask for as part of their application process. Certainly everybody is going to have an application of some sort, but the questions or the information that they ask or other documents that they may require are going to vary by institution. So this really goes into the first segue is when you have a student, when they are ready to apply to schools, to make sure if they've formulated their list of schools that they've decided to apply to, that they're aware of the deadlines and the requirements that each university may have. Even here in Massachusetts, for example, there are 9 public universities, 4-year public universities, that is not including the UMass system, and the requirements to apply to Fitchburg State, what we ask for, could be different from Westfield State. So understanding, even though we're both public universities here in the Commonwealth, what we may be looking for is different. So it is important to, and all of this information is readily available on any college's, their admission homepage. What's required to apply. The other thing to keep in mind is sometimes depending on the program, hi, come on in. Depending on a major that your child is applying to, that could have different requirements as well. So for example, nursing. Nursing is a very competitive program. Many a very selective program, often because they are a capped program, meaning they're only allowed to enroll so many students in that program per year. There are other majors that could do that, but that's, for my example, using nursing, students may be required to submit other information in addition to the basics to apply to Fitchburg State as an example. We have a nursing program. If a student is applying to Fitchburg State, we require the things that are absolutely required are only the official application and then an official copy of their transcript. If you're applying to nursing, it's the application, obviously an official transcript, and then there are 3 additional questions that are asked specifically of nursing students that they're required to complete. It's a little bit different. So same thing can be said for a lot of different programs. So you want to make sure that you are understanding what is required for the school or the program that you're applying to. So the good news is that, starting out looking at, as your students start their search process, and I certainly encourage them to be doing that before the fall of their senior year, but we know that everybody is, take it from somebody who didn't do that, that's a great idea. And even if by, starting your search or the student search really during their junior year, not that they have to say, okay, I know I'm going here, but to explore those schools or those areas of interest, that helps narrow that list. So then before you're getting into that application process, usually starting in the fall of their senior year, you know where you're applying to and you have the information you need. So it makes it a little less stressful for you, for the student, if you've kind of narrowed that list down during that time period between 10th and 11th grade or whatnot. Makes it less stressful. So certainly recommend that as far as what is being required. So
And you want to jump into the frequently asked questions?
I'm going to jump right down these, and then again, because these are often kind of the most questions that are most often asked from students and families. And again, if your question isn't here or if there are other things we can ask, we'll certainly have time to do that as well. So right out of the gate, how will SAT or ACT scores be used in test optional schools? Would my student be disadvantaged for not sending a test score? Okay. Pardon me if this is if this seems like a really basic question. I'm not trying to insult anybody. Does everybody in the room know what the SAT or the ACT exams are? Is there anybody that doesn't? Okay, I'm going to skip that tutorial. So, as you may have seen over the last several years, starting actually even before COVID, but certainly during the pandemic, more and more colleges and universities had adopted a test optional policy regarding standardized test scores. Again, this is an individual choice by a college and university, whether they're going to require that piece of information as part of the process. How will they be used in test optional schools? Basically, the word is right in there with test optional. If your student chooses to submit their SAT or ACT scores, we look at this as another piece of information that a student is choosing to provide us as we're trying to get to know this student as an individual to feel that they're a good fit for our college or university, right? So many schools, Fitchburg State being one of them, have adopted truly there's a policy of do no harm, meaning that it is truly an option. And if you don't submit them, it's not looked at poorly. It's not looked at as, there's no assumption being made that, oh, they probably didn't do that well, so that's why they chose to be test optional. No, it's literally an option, and we use that information if provided, just like we do when somebody sends an essay on a certain topic. We're not judging what the topic is, we're trying to get to know that student better. There are some schools out there that are called test blind, which means don't send it, we don't look at it at all. Even if you send it to us, we are not going to consider it as part of the process. Would your student be disadvantaged for not sending scores? For the most part, most universities will tell you no. There are some universities that will say, with a caveat to standardized test scores, we won't look at your test scores, or we're test optional for admission, meaning for considering for admission. But if you want to be considered for scholarships, you must submit your scores. So you're test optional for the purpose of being admitted to the school. But if you would like us to consider you for a merit scholarship or any type of institutional aid, some schools do require it. This circles back to that point where I always say that schools individually make choices what they're going to require or how they choose to award scholarships and whatnot. So the best thing you can do is ask this question. Ask this question to any school that you and your student are interested in, whether it's during a campus tour, whether it's reaching out to their admission office, any way, shape, or form you could, ask that question. This process for so many families, unfortunately, and students, can be confusing, overwhelming, create a lot of anxiety. We want, admission professionals, my colleagues, directors at other colleges and universities, we want to help mitigate that anxiety as much as possible. We want to answer your questions. So never think that you are annoying or bothering an admission counselor or the admission office when you reach out and ask these questions. You're like, well, my daughter's only a 10th grader. Should I not be asking this now? If you feel like, if you want to ask the question now, ask the question now. And if you have a question 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months after that, and it's to the same school, reach out and ask us. We want you to make the best decision for you and for your student when it comes to where they're going to school. And you want to make sure that you have all of the information you need to make the best decision for you. You never want to make a decision when you're questioning or you still have doubts about a certain, the certain institution, whatever that may be. So, again, standardized testing. Seems that more and more schools are continuing to. Some schools have suspended it for a period of time, the last 2 years, maybe some have gone as far as 4 years out. Part of this was also the challenge of the pandemic for students to have the ability to take the test because SAT, ACT tests were canceled pretty consistently throughout the pandemic. So it was an access issue for students, even if they wanted to take it, to be able to do that, which was the kind of a jumping off point for a number of schools. But if you look at the research, it's actually with organizations called Fair Test, there are a lot of concerns that institutions have regarding the use of standardized testing and the advantage and disadvantage that students can have. And it's actually according to research, the least predictor, the least accurate predictor of college level success. So, yes, sir.
In any situation, would there be any disadvantage in not sending the?
I would whether the decision whether to send or not send, I would say this: if you believe that the scores that the student receives are an accurate representation of their ability, submit them. Look at what is the look to the school itself. What is the average SAT, ACT score of their last year incoming class? Does it fall within that range? Do that. If you're not sure, ask the admission officer. My son has a 1280 SAT score, based on, we're test optional. Do you feel that would help, or do you feel that would hinder? They'll be very honest and say, hey, you know what? That really falls in line with what we see with our students there too, and if it's reflective of their ability, yeah, you should submit that. Or they'd say, you know what? You might want to choose to be test optional, so we're not looking at that, and we're looking at the other aspects there too. So that is a fair question to ask as well. Yes?
When you say other options, what do you mean by that? What would they be also looking at?
So when we're looking at a college application, most schools are really looking at it in what's called a holistic review. We're looking at everything that the student provides. So the first thing in any institution will tell you the most important thing is a student's high school transcript, right? Because any school wants to make sure that you have the academic foundation from high school to be successful at that institution academically. They don't want to set students up for to fail. So it's that. It can be letters of recommendation. It can be, the essay the student submits. These are all things that we're looking at. We're trying to learn about that student as an individual, just like students are looking for a college or university that's the right fit. Universities are looking at those students to say, does this student seem like they would be the right fit for our institution? So those are the things that they're looking for, with the in that holistic review. Does that include things like co-curricular activities, ways that you're involved outside of the classroom, leadership opportunities, service work that students have done? Yes, that could all play into that as well, which is usually identified as part of the application process. What are those things that you're interested in? What are those things that you've pursued outside of academics? What experiences have you gained from that too? So now, question, yes?
So the merit scholarship, you say that what is depend on merit scholarship? It is like income based, or how it is calculated the merit scholarship?
Great. So that leads into a bigger question about financial aid overall. I am not a financial aid expert, but I will tell you that financial aid really comes in basically two forms. One could be non-need-based scholarship or grant, so merit scholarships that a student may qualify for based on their academic success in high school, which has nothing to do with a family's income whatsoever. Then institutions also offer what's called need-based aid. So that is depending, that need-based aid and what may be awarded by the institution is based on the family's financial situation. So need-based aid can include federal financial aid, which could be a Pell Grant, which is a grant that doesn't have to be paid back. It could be other federal loans that a student may qualify for based on their income. It also could be institutional aid that the university itself has their own dollars that they provide in need-based aid to families. So need-based aid is often, there's another requirement to be considered for need-based aid that colleges and universities use. It's called the Fafsa, which is the free application for federal student aid. Even though it says federal there too, they also use that information to look at institutional aid. And again, need-based aid is going to be based on the students, the family's finances, but merit scholarships or other grants that the institution may offer is non-need based. So they may qualify for a merit scholarship regardless of how much or how little a family makes. So there is a difference.
But my question is that what they look for to get a merit scholarship?
So that's going to, once again, depend on the university. Some schools will say, if you have a certain, they might spell it out and say, there's a certain required GPA. If you have a 3.75 and above, I'm making this up here, you may qualify for the Presidential Merit Scholarship, which is $10,000 a year. And if you have a 3.0 to a 3.2, you might get the Special Student Scholarship, which is $3,000 a year too. The college and universities, they set up their own qualifying kind of scale, if you will, or their own criteria to determine what that is. There's not one school. You may be offered a merit scholarship at one school and not another, and that's based on what that university chooses to do with their merit scholarships, or the amounts can vary very differently as well. But it's going to be based individually on that, depending on the university that you're applying to.
So like you said, one GPA. What are the other factors like that?
I'm sorry?
For the merit scholarship, you said one is GPA, right? What are the other factors can be for that?
Other factors aside from a GPA could be the rigor of the courses that a student has taken. So is there a student with a 3.0 GPA, solid B student, in a college preparatory level curriculum versus a student with a 3.0 GPA that's taken all honors in advanced placement classes? There's a difference in rigor there that could vary a scholarship amount, as an example. Sometimes it could be something specific. If they had a specific scholarship geared for students going into the STEM fields, they might be looking at the GPA in just that student science and math coursework for that particular scholarship. So there are other factors other than a GPA. I just use that as the most common example.
Thank you.
Following what my neighbor said, so in the transcript of the school, so is that, does the transcript only have a GPA and the score, or does the transcript have other things that the college will consider?
Sure, so great question. So what we will see in a scholarship at most schools will be certainly the course that the student has taken, the title of the course, the grade that's received, what level that course has been taught at, such as a college prep level, is it an honors or an AP course, is it a remedial course there too. So we'll see usually the level that that course has been taken, the course, and then the grade, and often the grading system that the school uses. Because the GPA scale or how schools grade varies by high school. When we receive a transcript from a high school, a student applies from Shrewsbury High School, when the school counseling office sends us the official transcript for the student, they also usually include what's called the school profile, which explains to us, this is our grading system. We grade on a 4.0 scale, or we grade on a 100-point scale. So we have the information to know how grading works here at Shrewsbury High School versus Marlborough High School versus St. John's, because those can be different. So we have an understanding of, and we review by territory, meaning that our admission counselor for Amanda, who is my admission counselor, who's the counselor for students here at Shrewsbury, she reviews the Shrewsbury files. So she has an understanding as a territory manager in my office how the grading works. And if there was ever something that we were confused about, we'd pick up the phone and call. But usually we know our schools.
And since we're actually on this, I want to skip to that third bullet about GPAs.
Yeah.
Are GPAs recalculated, and what is a good GPA?
Sure.
We are on a 5.0 scale, for reference.
Sure. So our GPA is recalculated, meaning that are they taking the GPA here at Shrewsbury High School and recalculating that based on a certain metric that the university that they're applying to uses. So in Massachusetts, any student, you're applying to any state university in Massachusetts, so any of the four-year public universities, any of the UMass systems, a student's GPA is recalculated.
Forgot about that.
Oh, yeah, we should not do that.
I feel like I'm in a movie right now that just played in.
They play music during passing time.
Oh, okay. How long am I listening to Fly Me to the Moon?
5 minutes.
Okay, we're gonna keep going. We'll just call that background music, I love a good crowd. So, meaning that we recalculate based on a 4.0 GPA. So what that means is that we put, so in a 4.0 GPA, we look at core academic areas such as English, math, social studies, science, world language. We look at core academic areas that are competency-based, not performance-based. So we don't add into that recalculating GPA physical education or chorus or art. We're looking in those core academic areas, and on that recalc, a 4.0 GPA, an A is a 4.0, a B is a 3.0, a C is a 2.0, a D is a 1.0, a failing class, a fail is, nothing. And there are different variations between the minuses and the pluses and courses there too. So we recalculate a student's GPA. We also give weight to certain types of courses. So a straight college prep course, let's say a college preparatory math class is a B, 3.0. When we recalculate, if that math class they're taking is an honors level class, we actually bump that up, so to a 3.5. If it was an AP class, we actually bump up a full letter grade. So that 3.0 in an AP class actually becomes a 4.0 in the recalculation because assigning for the rigor. sorry to take you down what could be a very confusing path. The bottom line is that institutions may recalculate because they want to look at students on an even playing field, because some schools may weigh a course really heavily in their GPA recalculation, and then there are some high schools out there that do not give a weighted GPA even to an advanced placement class. That's just not the way they do it. So in the state university system, in the UMass system, we recalculate. Again, that's an individual choice by an institution whether they choose to recalculate a GPA or not. What is a good GPA? There's a loaded question for you. Well, my high school GPA, not a good GPA, but we won't use that one there. Science was my downfall. I think what it comes down to is what is a good GPA? I think, again, and I hate to keep going back to it, varies by institution, but it does. You know, somebody that may be a good candidate for admission. So right now, Fitchburg State is an example. Right now, our incoming class, which is still, you know, being formulated and students are still making their decision. You know, right now, the average GPA of our incoming students to date so far is about a 3.2. All right, so overall about a B+ student. You know, it's a solid GPA for, you know, and like I said, students in that area are successful at Fitchburg State, and for the most part, like I said, there's a good foundation that is reflected in that GPA, what we see with students. Now, if I said I had a 3, you know, and I just lived this last year, I have a son that's a freshman in college, and, you know, he was a 3.7 GPA in high school, recalculated. His number one choice was Duke, and, you know, he had solid SAT scores. He didn't get close to Duke. You know, I mean, he didn't. He ended up at a fine school and having a great experience there too. But his GPA, you know, Duke's like we get 55,000 applicants. They accept about 4% of those applicants, and those, you know, because of their selectivity, that GPA is really, if you want to be at Duke, you should be looking at a, you know, 3.9 and above, and strong test scores and an incredible rigor and all these other things there too. So although where he ended up, good school, strong, you know, strong GPA, for that institution wasn't the right fit for him for Duke. So the good GPA, again, that's a great question to ask the colleges that you're touring, that you're visiting. What's the average GPA of a student that's coming in here? If they're like, you know, some will say, very few schools will say, here's the minimum cutoff for yes or no, because there's so much more that plays into that. So again, as you look at applicants holistically, they're not, you know, there's not very many places that say, okay, if you are below a 3.0, you're out, and above, you're in. Just doesn't work like that, because there are too many variations of what actually constitutes that certain GPA. Make sense? Or did I go off on a tangent because the music stopped? I'm sorry.
So like Shrewsbury goes by on a 5.0 basis.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the colleges you're talking about, they generally go on 4.0, right?
Colleges work on a 4.0 system pretty much universally, unlike high schools. There are some colleges that grade very differently, or some that actually as part don't do grades. But that's, you know, and there are some high schools that don't do that in a traditional sense. So
the systems are different. So how would I know? Because if my son is getting his course on 5.0 and the college is saying, oh, 3.9 is good, my son might have 4.8 or 3.0 or whatever. How would I know where does he rate? Because there are two different systems. I'm not comparing apples to apples at that point.
So that's a great conversation to have with the admission counselor at that school and say, here's their, you know, could I send you the transcript? Would you be willing to take a look and show me what I'm looking at for, you recalculate GPAs, what's the GPA that you recalculate that student to my student to? You know, would you be able to do that for me? Yeah.
We can also figure it out too, a little bit. We can give you a general idea of what it is on a 4.0 scale. So your student can talk to their school counselor and get that overview.
And I think maybe perhaps another loaded question, but just good courses a student should take, or just what kind of courses do admissions officers typically look for? Like, is there a certain level of math, certain level of history, science?
Great question. So, what are the good courses students should take? Certainly, there are courses that are required for your student to graduate from Shrewsbury High School. Certainly, so many credits, so many units. What colleges basically are looking for, and again, this can vary a little bit by school. Certainly, 4 years of English. Most schools want 4 years of math, 3 years of science, 3 years of social studies, and 2 years of the same world language taken in high school. So not if I took Spanish 1 in 8th grade and took Spanish 2 in 9th grade, most schools are looking for a second year of language within that. Okay, that's a guideline. It can vary by institution. That's what we look for at the state university system. So the state university and the UMass systems, those are the minimums that we're looking for. Some might be, certainly if you have somebody going into a STEM field, a science field, they're going to want to see 4 years of science as well. Certainly if somebody was looking to major in a world language, certainly want to see 4 years of language throughout the high school too. They didn't just stop at Spanish 2 and say, I'm good, now I'm going to want to go off and major in Spanish. Like to see that they had a little more curriculum there. So this is not, although I talk about the core electives, that I am not trying to be, or the core subjects, I am not trying to be dismissive of elective courses. There are great elective courses out there that if somebody's like, well, I'm taking a psychology course, it's not required, it's a social science. Yeah, psychology is a great class. That's, we're going to look at that. We're going to consider those things. When it also comes to good courses, I want to talk a little bit about rigor, meaning that certainly we want students to take the most rigorous course available to them that it makes sense for the student to be in. Okay? I'm going to use myself as an example. I grew up not too far from here in Marlborough, went to Marlborough High School, and I graduated 2 or 3 or 34 years ago. I mentioned it before, science was not my subject, okay? No matter how hard I tried, science was not my wheelhouse. I would have had zero business being in an AP science course of any way, shape, or form, right? I was not going to impress anybody with the D minus that I would be lucky to be getting in an AP science class because I had no business being there, right? When I see a student, in most cases, with failing an AP class, extremely low grades in that, I'm usually thinking that they shouldn't be in that class. I understand there's a challenge in rigor and you step up and you want to, but again, that was not my aptitude. Worst part about it, my dad was a science teacher, but we won't go there. I did take advanced placement courses in psychology and U.S. history. I was very driven to the social sciences. It was a great way for me to challenge myself there. So we want to say that, and for many schools, AP courses or honor courses aren't required for admission. We love to see a student challenge themselves if it makes sense for them to do so. We don't want to, again, set a student up for failure. That doesn't mean that they're taking the easy road. It means that they're taking the appropriate road. Right? Applying to colleges, the college experience is an individual journey for your students. The challenge is that the nature sometimes of students and of families is to compete with their neighbor. My best friend is applying to Harvard and Yale and Cornell, and they're taking 6 AP classes, and they have a tutor, and in part-time they build rockets with underprivileged children on Sundays. Oh my Lord, I have to do that. But I don't like science, I'm not really interested in those schools, but somebody else is doing it. This is an individual journey. The school choices that students make are individual. You're looking for they're looking for a college experience that is going to best suit them and fit them in their environment, the choice of, what they choose to study as their academic major, the ways they want to get involved outside of the classroom when they go to college, what other interests do they have, and does the university, the college that they're choosing, allow them to, support them in that vision. And a lot of times you say, well, my child is 16 years old and they don't know what their vision is. That's okay. If there's an areas of interest that they have, things that they're hoping to pursue or explore, that's what college is about. College is, I know everybody looks at college and says, okay, it's expensive. What's the return on my investment? Am I getting a job in my field? Am I gonna, can I guarantee that? Nobody goes over the bridge or goes over the stage at graduation, is handed their college diploma and their career path or their first job. What I will tell you is that if the students are engaged, no matter what school you go to, take advantage of the opportunities and experiences they have, that's what's going to lead them to career success. Because the other thing too is that even after college, they may change their mind. They may thought they wanted to be an accountant, and then they decided that they wanted to be a botanist. And sometimes parents go, oh, great, that's the reality. I lived that. I went to school, I'm a proud graduate of the Massachusetts public higher education system. I have bachelor's, I was a double major in criminal justice and psychology at Westfield State. I left Westfield State, graduated, went into a career of almost 12 years in law enforcement, and had decided I'm about age 32. That wasn't for me anymore, and I actually wanted to work with college kids. And I transitioned into higher education, and I hear where I am now. You couldn't have told me that at 2021. I was like, I'm going to be a police officer, I'm going to be in that field, that's what I want to do. Again, I get it. Sometimes things change their mind. To be honest, what allowed me to get into my current field was the experience I had in college that had nothing to do with criminal justice. It had to do with the fact that I was an active student leader, I was an orientation leader, I was engaged there, and that's where I found my love for the college environment and working with college students. It had nothing to do with my bachelor's degree or what that discipline was. Sometimes students change their mind, and that's okay. But again, this is an individualized process, and don't worry, and it's so hard to tell a student, don't worry about what your friend's doing, don't worry about what your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your dog's doing, whatever it is, it's about you. This is the one time in their life, I tell students, it sounds hypocritical, this is the one time in their life it's okay to be a little selfish. Not in a mean way, but understand that this is about them.
I think that actually brings to the next question of how important is it actually to declare your major? Like,
Right.
if a student doesn't know, should they just go undecided? Is that advantage or disadvantage?
One of the most popular majors at the vast majority of schools each year with their incoming class is called I'm Still Trying to Figure Out My Major. Some call it pre-major, some call it undecided. The reality is that in most colleges and universities, students who are still deciding on their major are welcome, and there are tools and there are people and there are advisors to help them shape what that looks like. So, oftentimes when a student says, I have no idea what I want to do, that's not necessarily true. That's how they're describing it, but maybe it's because they have 2 or 3 possibilities rolling around in their head. And they're trying to help somebody figure out how to shape exploring those opportunities. So going into a program or into a college or university undeclared, if that is an option, you should talk about what are the, what kind of supports is my student as an undeclared major going to receive to help them find their way. Nobody's going to pick a major for them, but at Fitchburg, for example, all of our pre-majors or undeclared have dedicated advisors that work specifically with that student population. And they work with them in tools and surveys and conversation about, well, where are your interests? Let's guide you into some of those interests. I might be interested in psychology. Great, let's get you in an intro to a psychology class to give you an idea about that. And then if you decide after that, oh, that's not for me, that's okay. That class wasn't wasted because it counts toward your general education requirements that all students complete regardless of their major. So it kind of gives them a track and a focus to be able to do that. So as far as the only disadvantage is to not knowing what you want to do is it may preclude you from certain majors because of the way the curriculum is designed. And I'll go back to nursing as my example. So because the curriculum is so highly structured in our nursing program, as in most nursing programs, okay, you need to start out as a nursing major day one and to keep yourself on track. And so many programs don't allow students to change their major into nursing because one, there might not be space, but two, they're already out of sequence. So some programs may do that. Some engineering programs as well said, you need to come in this major day one because we need to make sure that you stay on track with that, with that curriculum. So there are some programs that may, be prohibited for entering or changing your major into, but again, that's going to vary by institution. I sometimes wish that more students would come in undeclared, if that's truly where they are. I never want to see a student pick a major because they think, well, I'll get a job there. I'll go back to business. Somebody says, I'm going to be a business major because that means I'm going to get a job. But I hate math. I'm really not interested in business at all, but it seems to be the safe bet. If you really don't have an interest in doing that and pursuing that, you're already setting yourself up to fail. Make the choice that works for you. And I would argue that coming in undeclared allows you more flexibility. And if you're not sure what you want to do and there's 2 or 3 things rolling through your head, choose a school that's going to provide you options. Fitchburg State, I have over, close to 40 academic majors that a student can choose from. And if those 3 things that you're interested are on that school's list, and I like all the other aspects of the school, that could be a good fit for me because it's easier to change my major than it is to realize what I want to do isn't there and now I'm transferring schools, which does happen and that's fine too, but it's, if I really like the school, it's nice to know that I have the options still in-house. There are some schools out there, Holy Cross. Holy Cross, all students enter into Holy Cross without a major. They actually don't declare a major until their junior year. That can vary by institution how they approach students entering into their majors too. A unique example. Not all schools do that, but some places it is a little different. So, yes?
Are there any programs before they enter into the college system so that the kids can get a feel of what it feels like to go into a special field so that you give them exposure so that they're better prepared when they go to college rather than figuring out later?
There are early college programs that are out there. A lot of, I would say, your school counseling office may be a good resource for some programs that may be available. Some individual universities offer a summer program to allow rising seniors an opportunity to come to that. I know WPI has a number of programs. I'm close with their vice president there. Just as an example, there are also, even when students are, in high school, they may have the opportunity, depending on the school or whatnot, to be involved in a dual enrollment course, meaning a course that is sponsored by, taught, or potentially, taught by faculty from Worcester State. Maybe they come here and teach a class, or students take a class and go to Worcester State during their school day to take their, an English 101 class, and randomly taking classes there too. So there are opportunities oftentimes. The other advantage of that is, one, it gives a student a feel of what a college course really may be like, and two, they could also be earning college credit for those courses that apply to wherever they go to school. Even if you took an early college or a dual enrollment class with Worcester State or with Fitchburg State, even if you didn't enroll at Fitchburg State, that class still may transfer to wherever it is you do go because it's a college level course that they are then coming in with, 3 or 4 credits and not having to take English Comp or Writing 101 their first semester at X university. So there are opportunities. I would check with the school counseling office to see what they may be aware of in this area. But, or even some of the local colleges, universities, right here in the greater Worcester area, it's not like you don't have enough of them. So,
I can say we are this year, we started a dual enrollment early college program with Worcester State. So right now we have some juniors and seniors taking a course at Worcester State on Saturdays. So they'll be earning college credit and high school credit. And we'll be offering that again in the summer and then next year as well. So we're just starting that program this year with Worcester State.
And one more follow-up I guess on this is that is subject-based SAT is still prevalent, I guess, in many colleges.
Again, it is real. I actually see more and more schools going away from those, but again, it's an individual choice, and I don't want to speak for an institution that I don't represent. I will tell you that the national trend is it seems that more and more schools are going away from them. Really, a lot of it is jumping on board the test optional or test blind bandwagon. Is, well, if we're going to be test optional, it's going to include subject tests. So it does, again, really go on the institution. But again, like I said, national trend currently seems to be moving away from that too, for the same reasons that that schools are moving away from, moving to test optional or test blind policies, because the same rationale in their eyes applies.
I will also add that the subject-based SAT exams are no longer offered as well, so the students can't really take them. Yeah, we used to have them at Shrewsbury High School, but now we only offer the SAT. Same thing with, like, there used to be the SAT with the essay, that's gone,
Right.
so it's just SAT.
Schools weren't using them, so it was
College board.
college.
Yeah.
Yeah, College Board got rid of them because the colleges and universities like, we're not using this information. Don't try and, students paying for that option, doing that for something that wasn't being used or needed by the schools. And that's what the college and universities were telling College Board, to have them move away from that.
What kind of courses do you offer in summer for
I
12?
would like to know the list of courses for the dual
Oh,
courses.
for the Worcester, it's going to be personal finance this summer. So it's introduction to business.
And we'll get in
semester.
touch with you how to sign up.
Yes. There is limited enrollment, so it may be a lottery, but again, we'll be offering more courses next year, every year.
And then we have
only for
about-
juniors and seniors.
Yes.
And we have about 5 minutes left, so I just want to, so grades-wise, we know 9, 10, 11th grade gets shown on the transcript, early action versus regular decision. What do you see, do you look at quarter 1 grades, semester 1 grades, depending on the deadline?
So, for us as a rolling admissions school, meaning that we don't do an early action deadline, we start reviewing applications early in the fall and start setting those decisions out versus some schools that offer an early action deadline, meaning, apply by November 1st and you'll find out by January 1st. We don't require first quarter senior grades. Currently, we used to, we changed that last year, but any school also reserves the right to ask for them. So if we have a student that applies and we have their transcript for their first 3 years of high school, and maybe it's a little wonky. Maybe you're Tony's transcript in high school, and we say, you know what? We're gonna, they'll reach out and say, you know what? We're actually gonna hold off on making a decision until we receive we're gonna ask the student to provide their first quarter grades. We wanna give the student, basically I say, as much runway as possible to demonstrate things like a positive grade trend. Maybe for some reason, sophomore year was a little wonky, or junior year was a struggle, and everyone's like, oh, junior year's a struggle, I'm not gonna get into college. Pump the brakes. It's, we wanna look and say, okay, it looks like you're back on track. We wanna make sure that that trend is continuing. If you're a student like myself, when I was in high school, my freshman year was, I think the technical definition was train wreck. It was not. It was a struggle year for me. It was adjusting to a new school, new expectations, trying to figure out how to study properly in, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, my grades improved. My GPA was lower because that freshman year I really struggled in a few classes, and it's an average. So, starting off low, GPAs are a lot more difficult to raise than they are if you were starting grade out of the gate and then something dropped off, because again, it's averaging. But that's why we don't just look at the GPA number. We look at things like grade trend, because Tony was a hot mess freshman year, but I see the grades improving sophomore, junior year. For me, I would have wanted to apply a little later to the schools when I was going off to college, because I wanted those first quarter grades in there for senior year, because I wanted to show that my trend was continuing. So if we don't have the information we need, many colleges will reach back out to the student and say, we'd really love, we're not going to make a decision yet. We'd like to see your first quarter grades. Sometimes, depending on the situation or the school, might even roll into the mid-year grades, to see how you've done after the first semester. So, again, what schools require are going to be different, but definitely they're going to require the bare minimum. Don't send your transcript after sophomore year and say, will I get in? I'll put on my tinfoil hat and check my crystal ball, and I will say, I don't know. So.
I think we are pretty much just at 9 o'clock on here.
Okay. Do we have any last questions? We do have 2 minutes.
I think we talked about the merit scholarships and example of the GPA in getting those merit scholarships. How does, for example, sports or extracurricular activities play a part in that merit scholarships?
It may, depending on the school, it may have nothing to do with merit scholarships. Some merit scholarship could be based solely on academic performance, okay? At some schools. When I worked at St. Anselm College, involvement outside of the classroom, especially in areas of leadership, were something that we could consider in addition to GPA with merit scholarship. An individual institution may look at that and say, okay, there are some schools offer certain scholarships that may have nothing to do with academics. It may be for D3 sports.
So I think that is kind of
We have one more. We could do
One
one
more.
more.
Yeah, we can do one.
Follow up on that. For the merit scholarship, is there a separate application process?
No, great question. Most schools will not require you to submit a separate merit scholarship application. Oftentimes that is part of the review process, and you could be notified as early as your acceptance letter if they've been awarded a merit scholarship. Most cases there are not. If there are some schools, if they have anything that's specific to, maybe they have a certain endowed scholarship for a specific major for all, whatever, insert your major here. We have an opportunity from an alum that created a scholarship for incoming freshmen that want to major in Spanish. We want to make you aware of it, but there is a separate application for that one. So sometimes there are one-off scholarships that there may be an application for, but again, for the most part, for merit scholarshiping for a college or university, most are considering that when the application is being reviewed and there's no additional requirement.